the Bureau of Labor Statistics had to reduce the number of jobs that the Harris administration claimed that they created. They had to drop it by 800,000 jobs. They basically said they created 800,000 more jobs than they did. They were caught lying by a whistleblower. And so that, again, shows you who you're dealing with. So I'm looking for a president that I can trust, somebody who understands the economy, somebody who has the respect of the military, somebody who understands global and microeconomics, and somebody who's got a common sense. And I think Donald Trump has all of those attributes. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Make More with Matt Heslin Podcast. I'm Matt Heslin, I'm your host. Glad to be with you. I hope everybody had a great Labor Day. Speaking of Labor Day is the touch point when people start paying attention to the elections. Up until Labor Day, people don't typically pay much attention to federal or state elections and who's running. And now's the point when people start getting familiar with the candidates and their relative positions and how they correlate with your own or may not correlate with your own. So today, what I wanted to do is I wanted to share my opinions on the election. I wanted to spell out for the reason I'm supporting certain people and the reason I'm not supporting certain people. And hopefully it'll give you some things to think about, help you make a better decision and an informed decision when you go to the polls in November. Remember, November 5th is the election date, so you can mail your ballot in early, or you can certainly go to the polls. I like to go to the polls personally. I like doing my civic duty. I like being in the box, making sure my ballot gets casted. So you do it your way, do whatever works for you, but just vote. Make sure you vote. It's critical. I want to start at the presidential level because I think that's really key to the down ballot races that are going to occur. Because whoever wins the top presidential position, I believe will have a big effect on who's going to be elected at the lower levels. So we have both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I want to start by laying it out. The most important issue that we are facing as a country is the economy. Amongst illegal immigration and the border and, lack of police force availability and readiness. So I want to talk a little bit about the economy first. First of all, we are in what I told you 2 or 3 weeks ago in stagflation, which is a stagnant economy. I mean, it's not growing. It's growing at about 1% under Kamala Harris. When Donald Trump was president, it was growing 3%. So that's a lot. And in a multi-trillion-dollar economy, that's a lot of dollars we're talking about. So from a growth perspective, the GDP growth under Harris and Biden has been about 1%. Under Trump, was about 2.5 to 3. So that's a big difference. The other thing I want you to think about is that real incomes were up 6% under Donald Trump. And under Harris Biden, it's down 4%. So that's a 10-point swing in your incomes. So people's real incomes are down probably more like 25% when you take inflation into account and factor into the price of goods and services. Your income's probably down at least 20-25% from when Donald Trump was president. I literally don't think these guys have a fucking clue what they're doing. I'm looking at what they're doing. I'm looking at what the inflation has been. In real inflation, if you look at goods and services, so groceries, oil, any commodity, health insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance is up 40%. Some goods and services are up 50 to 100%. A lot of that, of course, is because the government under the Biden-Harris administration printed trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars and flooded the economy with the dollars, which made the dollars cheaper. And when dollars become cheaper, they become worth less. And so people ask for more dollars for their goods and services, which by default and definition is inflation. So they are directly responsible for the inflation we're experiencing. Some people say, well, it's part of the bounce back from COVID, which is partially true. But the reality is that the inflation is a big part of what our problem is as a country. That's going to be a big factor going forward in the election. Who do you trust to keep inflation under control. Because remember, inflation is a tax. It's a tax on your money. You buy less with the same dollars you had the day before. So that's one thing I really think you need to hone in on. Is inflation is rampant. They try to slow it down by rushing interest rates super high, super fast. And what it did was it had an effect of stagnating the economy because they did it too fast. So it's kind of like driving too fast, and then you realize you got to slam on the brakes so you don't hit the car in front of you. They were jamming along at 85 and a 55 and figured out that they jammed it too fast. So now they're talking about a major cut. I mean, it's kind of like this thing, like it was too far left, too far right, too far left. They don't have the ability to moderate their policies in such a way where the economy can grow, responsibly without inflation. Now, Donald Trump, when he was president, had inflation at 1.4%, the lowest it had been in decades. And the other thing that is interesting about this is that when Donald Trump was president, we had full employment, but unemployment was about 3.5%. And now we don't have full employment. We have a lot of people who want to work, who can't find work, and that's a part of that stagflation because the policies have put the businesses in such precarious positions, they can't hire people. They don't want to hire people. And with the advent of AI, you're going to hire less people. So they've put themselves and us at a risk of a deep, deep recession. I believe that we're in a recession. I've said it before. I know it takes 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in order to be defined by the administration or the government as a recession. But trust me, we're in a recession. All the indicators, meaning the manufacturing indexes, consumer confidence indexes, CPI, consumer price indexes, when they get below 50, above 50 indicates expansion. Below 50 is recession or contraction. And every single solitary indicator is below 50 now. So that just backs up what I'm saying. That is that we're in a recession. And if you want to get out of the recession, there's only one guy who can do it. And I believe that in my opinion, is Donald Trump. He's a businessman. He understands inflation. He understands how money works. He understands how bad policy can affect everybody's incomes and job growth and the economy. I don't think Kamala Harris has ever done anything worthwhile or certainly noteworthy. When she was in California, she denigrated and desecrated California. She put the most black men in prison of any DA. So she's not a friend of the African American community. And when Trump was president, we had less crime. We had less people homeless. We had less people on the streets fighting. I mean, here's an example. Last weekend, on Labor Day weekend in Chicago, over 100 people were shot. I don't remember how many were killed, but I think it was 117 people were shot, something like that. I mean, she supports a defund the police movement. He does not support that. He supports our men in blue. So there's a total contrast in policy, and policies have outcomes and consequences. Her policy was defund the police. And you saw what happened in Minnesota, and you said New York, Chicago, LA. You've seen all the effects. And in Colorado recently, where a gang of Venezuelans overtook apartment buildings. This is truly a deciding moment in our history. This presidential decision is going to make or break this country. This is the election that you need to be paying attention to and focused on and really understand who you're voting for and why. So just to reiterate, I think it's important to understand who you're voting for and why. Truthfully, when you look at the economics of both parties and you understand what they have done, we've seen what Donald Trump has done in the past. We've seen what Kamala Harris has done in the past. Trump was a huge success, and Harris has been a huge failure. And I think that this is just something that we got to figure out going forward. Who do you trust to manage the economy and steer it? That's a vital question. The other thing that comes to mind is the parties and the down ballot races. You know, it's going to have a big impact on who controls the House and the Senate. The president can't get much done by himself. He can have short-term decisions via executive order, but the next president can turn right around and erase those. So you really need a House and Senate that's cooperative with you. I believe that the down ballot races will be directly correlated to who's the president. So it's incredibly important that you understand that that point is real and has consequences. So you're not just voting for president. You know, you're voting for the down ballot races, your congressmen, your senators, your local officials that have all impacts on your life. Those are critically important to understand. One of the things that you ought to be focused on and very concerned about is the open border policy of the Harris-Biden administration. They have let in an estimated 20 million undocumented illegal aliens, and by some accounts, 300,000 to 400,000 criminals, documented, verified criminals that were in prison, insane asylums, you name it. They've turned all towards the border, and Biden and Harris let them all in. Trump actually built the wall, and all Biden had to do was finish that wall. But now that the wall is wide open, we have crime in all of our cities. Crime across the country is up, I think, 16%. In some cities, it's up 40%. The border towns especially are getting hammered. But make no mistake about it, Colorado is now bearing a big brunt of this illegal immigration wave. I own a lot of property in Colorado, and some of the properties that have been overrun by the gangs have been not too far from my properties. And so, keep in mind, these defund the police policies of the Harris administration, the open border policy have really had a major effect on life in America today. Basically, on not just how we live, but on what we fear and what we're scared of and how we protect our families. I think the choice is an easy one on this one, too. On this issue, Donald Trump is the one to elect. He had a border policy that was strict and was controlled, and he had the support of ICE, he had the support of all the Border Patrol. Harris has none of that. She was appointed as border czar and didn't even go to the border one time in 4 years. She didn't take it seriously. She let them come flooding in, didn't support ICE, didn't support Homeland Security, and hence we've got these huge problems in America today. I think that point alone is boding very well for Donald Trump. One of the things we need to think about as Americans is the jobs and people working, because without jobs, they're already suffering from inflation, and they're already suffering from high prices in housing. And we've talked about housing a little bit, where housing is largely unaffordable for the average family now. And it's not just because prices have risen, which they have, but it's also because in terms of inflation, people aren't selling their homes. Like, I'm not selling my home because I have a 3% mortgage. People who have low-cost mortgages aren't selling, so there's nothing to buy. And when there is something to buy, there's a race to get to the finish line, and that drives the prices up. So prices are high, interest rates are high, inventory is low, and like we've talked about before, that's all a function of policy. And again, Harris, Biden have really screwed this thing up. It's interesting. Last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics had to reduce the number of jobs that the Harris administration claimed that they created. They had to drop it by 800,000 jobs. They basically said they created 800,000 more jobs than they did. They were caught lying by a whistleblower. And so that, again, shows you who you're dealing with. So I'm looking for a president that I can trust, somebody who understands the economy, somebody who has the respect of the military, somebody who understands global and microeconomics, and somebody who's got a common sense. And I think Donald Trump has all of those attributes. Whether you like his antics and his mean tweets and his stupid saying, calling people names, I don't like any of that. But I like his policies. So on November 5th, I'm voting for Donald Trump. And I think you should too. Going back to defunding the police and crime, Senator Harris, Vice President Harris rather, has supported a defund the police movement all across the country. Defund the police? What a stupid strategy. So you take the cops off the streets and you hold them accountable for things they didn't do or things they did that they had no choice but to do, and you berate them and beat them down. There have been more retirements, more terminations, and more defunding of the police than's ever happened in this country's history. That is all her leadership. That's what she stands for. That's who you'd be electing. But Donald Trump doesn't believe in any of that. He's the flip side of that. He believes in funding the police, incentivizing the police, growing our military, keeping on the border strong. All those things we've talked about, those are the things he believes. And he's going to keep pushing that agenda forward if he's elected on November 5th. One of the things I think that's really an existential threat to our way of life and our economy and our country and our freedoms and our Constitution is the big threat is Kamala Harris. She is a devout communist. And in the old days, that had a negative connotation to it. Like they'd call each other communists just as a mean way of speaking to one another. But I'm talking about communism as a policy, not as a name-calling exercise. Kamala Harris, her policies are communistic in nature. She believes the government should control every thought, idea, plan, and action you undertake. Donald Trump believes the exact opposite. Kamala Harris wants to tax every dollar that you make because she believes she can spend it better for you than you can. Donald Trump believes exactly the opposite. He believes more money in your pockets, make smarter decisions. You'll spend it where you need to spend it. So in reality, the communistic policies of Harris will destroy the nation. It will absolutely denigrate our nation, and we will have poverty like you've never seen before, and you will see the lack of freedom of the press, and you will see many more communistic plans and ideas and laws passed to support that communistic policy and agenda than if you vote for Donald Trump. Donald Trump will go the exact opposite way. So I want to encourage you to think about that. That's a critical thing. One of the things that's critical is when you're president, you are commander-in-chief of the military. And you have to have the support and respect of the troops. And Donald Trump had that when he was president. They adored him, they followed him, and Donald Trump didn't lead us into one single war. By comparison, Harris and Biden have led us into two wars, funding of the war with Israel and Hamas, the war with Israel and Hezbollah, and the war with Ukraine and Russia. Trump didn't get us into any of that, and none of that would have happened under his watch. But it's happening now. It's happening under the Harris watch. And literally, that is causing a massive amount of inflation because we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars in supporting these wars. And, if you want to buy a good stock, like I told you, buy Boeing, buy Martin Marietta, buy Lockheed, buy the defense industry stocks, because especially if Harris wins, because there'll be more wars, believe me. The Democrats have become the war party, and the Republicans have become the peace party. And that's a change in roles, but it's true. Staying on the lines of commander-in-chief, one of the worst decisions Kamala Harris and Joe Biden made was to pull out of Afghanistan all at one time and removing the troops first and leaving hundreds of billions of dollars of weaponry of our, top-notch, top-shelf military inventory on the ground for the kooks of Afghanistan to come and take and use against us. So she's not fit to be commander-in-chief. She has no idea what she's doing. And how is she going to stand up to Putin and to Xi and to Xi and to all the other leaders of the free world, Kim Jong-un, when she can't even she won't even do an interview, a live interviewed, taped interviewed segment with the press. She did it with a one-on-one, sit-down, pre-planned interview with ABC. Big deal. What she needs to do is come out and meet all the press and have a free presser event where she can be asked questions freely and openly, and we can get an understanding of how she responds. Right now, we have no idea who she is. We know what she's not done. She has not done her job. She's not protected the border like she was supposed to. She was the worst president, the worst vice president in history in her ratings. So we know that she's just not fit for the job. We thought Biden wasn't fit for the job. Well, this lady really ain't fit for the job. We need Donald Trump. We don't need his antics. We don't need his name calling. We need his policies. And that's what I'm hoping takes place on November 5th. And there's global elections happening all over the world. And you're seeing a movement to the right, to the conservative side, because people are tired of, woke policy. It doesn't work. Woke policy is craziness. It's insane. It does not work. And that's why most governments are voting to go to the right, with the exception of England, which just went to the left. Good luck there. I'm hoping that we do the right thing, that the independents in this country, that the African Americans and the Hispanic Americans and the Asian Americans will remember what Donald Trump did for them the first time, and he'll do it even bigger this next time. So get out there and support him. Go out there, grab 4 or 5 friends, and go to the polls. Make it a poll party. And go do something productive for the campaign. Work phone banks, walk precincts. They all have things that you can do. But keep in mind, as the rest of the world is going right, we don't want to make a turn to the left. This would be a 4th Obama term. If you think about it, Obama had 2 terms. He ran the Biden administration. Now he wants to run the Harris administration. Which is, why do you think he picked somebody so weak, so not ready for the job? She could win, but she's not going to be able to do a good job, and so Obama's going to have a 4th presidency if she wins. And that's not going to bode well with the rest of the country, nor the rest of the world. The rest of the world is going to know that our president, Kamala Harris, is just not fit for the job. And they're going to just take her down, laugh at her, make fun of her, and they're not going to respect her decisions or her policy statements. We need Donald Trump. The other thing that dawns on me to make everybody aware is the Chicago-style politics that took place last election in 2020, where there was ballot stuffing and dead people voting, and it's crazy. But we've got to do a better job of monitoring our elections. We need free and fair elections. We don't need Chicago-style, Biden, Obama-style, Harris-style, stuff the ballot box voting. We need free and fair elections. That requires integrity and honesty. That requires monitoring the polls. So volunteer to be a poll watcher. Volunteer to be a helper at the ballot counting stations. We have the right to audit these elections, and we should. Both parties should want that. I'm also a very big advocate for voter ID. I think we need to get voter ID as the law, where every state, every city, every precinct, you must show an ID to vote. You got to have a license to go fishing. You need a picture ID to go fishing. You need an ID to drive. You need an ID for everything, for flying. But you don't need an ID to vote. How crazy is that? How stupid is that? It's naive. It's just ass backwards. But that's what the Democrats want. The Republicans don't want that. We want free and fair elections. We're good with winning or losing on its merits. But we're not good with stuffing the ballot box and not having voter ID, having illegal aliens and dead people voting. That we're not okay with. And that's what they want. So that's something we're going to have to be very cognizant of. and be very, very aware as we go to the polls to watch for that. You know, in the interest of the country, it's very worthwhile to have two parties, if not more. I mean, I think there's room for a third and a fourth party to really give the people options. Just having a Democrat and Republican Party, I guess the Independent Party to a certain degree, is not enough. We need more representation, and we need better representation. And the MAGA movement is one such party. So I think it's important that we have parties to balance the power, balance the elections. But I really think it comes down to voting for the best person. And what I find interesting is Robert F. Kennedy, who has a long and rich history of the Democratic family. You know, they have been and were the face of the Democratic Party for many decades. And then the Democratic Party took a sharp left turn and went woke. And you see that Robert F. Kennedy has now joined Donald Trump in his effort to become president because he sees how far left and crazy the Democrats have gone. And then you see Tulsi Gabbard, former Democratic Congresswoman, very prominent. She's come over to the, I believe, Independent Party, maybe the Republican Party, but she left the Democratic Party. And there was a senator yesterday who left the Democratic Party. These people are leaving because the ideas are crazy and they do not comport with their values. They've gone hard left. And that's that communism and socialism that I'm talking about. You know, we're going communism/socialistic if we elect Harris. And it's never worked. It's never worked. It didn't work in Russia. It didn't work in Cuba. It didn't work in Europe. It hasn't worked anywhere. And so it didn't work in Venezuela. So it doesn't work. We should not adopt that policy of a communistic government control the economy and country, such as Ms. Harris is pushing for. So I think it's important to touch base on the fact that this is an election that's different than the COVID election. You know, during 2020, that was the COVID was going on, and it was at its highest peak. And people were voting very differently back then. Like my son, who's now 19, there's many people who have now matured past the COVID era, who are now voting today, who have different thoughts and different ideas than they probably did when COVID was going on. And so it's important to think about, where are you getting your information? Where are you getting your resources? Who are you getting guidance from? I think that's really important, to select credible sources. Do your research. Find out what you stand for, what you support. Do a gut check. And then figure out which candidate supports your themes and who supports your way of life and what you want your country to look like. Because it is going to make a major difference depending on who gets elected. Major difference. One will be total government control and rule by edict and tell you what to do. And one will be freedom and democracy with prosperity for all. And that'll be Donald Trump. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't think it was true. These are my opinions. I share these opinions with you because I think they're important. I think that I've thought them through. I've researched them. And I made my own decision. I don't like the personality of Donald Trump. I don't like the antics. I don't like the name calling. But I love his policies. And let's be clear. The name calling isn't going to do anything, but the policies will affect everything. And we need him for his policies. Okay, so I just want to put one more point there. The election's coming. It's coming November 5th. You got to get out there, get educated, read. Be careful what you're reading. Make sure you understand the source base from what you're reading and learning from. If it's your first time voting, enjoy the process. Get out there, vote your conscience, vote your interests, and enjoy the process. Look forward to seeing you guys on November 5th. Take care.